Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, we're talking about PSP emulation with PPSSPP. And PPSSPP has just released version 1.19.3. Now, just a few days ago, we talked about version 1.19, which was a pretty big release. And we've got a few releases since then with more on the way. So with the latest release here, version 1.19.3, it's mainly just a bug fix release, and this is one of the many reasons why I'd say it's probably a better idea to keep your emulators updated than not. So they say 1.19 was a big change. A-Track 3 plus music playback, which is a fundamental feature in a lot of games, got a big improvement, leading to many compatibility fixes. However, whenever you make a big change though, it's inevitable that something obscure breaks. In this case, A-Track 3, not plus. Files generated by other apps than the one used in games failed to decode due to a broken first packet. They go on to say here, and this is where I find it very weird and fascinating. This packet should have been skipped, but our calculations for that weren't quite right. And neither were the old ones, but they were wrong differently. So previously it had actually just worked by accident. So let me know your thoughts about that one. But they go on to say here, this affected a number of game modifications that many people like to play, such as a Crazy Taxi mod that adds back the proper music from the Dreamcast original, and also a number of modified soccer games which lost their music and commentary. Now on top of that, they fixed a crash on startup in Tony Hawk's Underground 2. They fixed a bug in Mac and Linux builds where the mouse got hidden and stuck if you enabled mouse input mapping. There's translation improvements and even more. Now based on my understanding and the way I'm reading it, it appears there's going to be a version 1.19.4 fairly soon. They say important, there's been a last-minute report of problems with certain PBP files. This will be fixed in a follow-up release in about a week or so. PPSSPP is by far the best PSP emulator out there, and if you're interested in it and wanted to learn more about it, like everything we talk about, links are in the description below right at the bottom. I don't hide my sources. And speaking about releases, next up here we're talking about the exact opposite, and something I am very disappointed about. If this is true, it's currently just a rumor. It's being reported over on Insider Gaming, and they say here a new Guilty Gear game has been cancelled. Unfortunately, details are pretty scarce, and I would take it with a grain of salt, but I wouldn't throw things out entirely. They say that sources say that the game's cancellation took place within the last couple of weeks. We don't know the current state of the game, or what state the game was in, or why it was cancelled, or even if it was cancelled. And Insider Gaming did reach out to Arc System Works for comment, but haven't heard back yet. Now, Guilty Gear Strive was released back in 2021, and I think Guilty Gear Strive is a fantastic game. I'd be really surprised if they didn't follow it up with something else. Maybe the Guilty Gear game in question was some sort of spin-off game that just wasn't shaping up well or wasn't going to be good for the series. Honestly here, I would be shocked if they gave up on Guilty Gear. And speaking about surprises, next up we're talking about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. Now we talked about Tony Hawk's yesterday in regards to the SpongeBob stage that was locked behind the deluxe copy of the game. And that was not necessarily sitting well with people. Well, it turns out here that there's something else that's not sitting well, I guess, with the development team. So there's a copy of a legally distinct Guitar Hero in the trash on Water Park. Now, surprisingly or not surprisingly, the Iron Galaxy dev team responded. And they say here, we have the utmost respect for anyone who makes games. We're investigating how that got in there in the first place. Thank you to the community for bringing this to our attention, and we'll be removing that from the environment art in the next update. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally find this hilarious, and I'm assuming there's going to be mods in the future to restore this after they remove it. And speaking about stuff that's hilarious, next up here we're talking about some retro gaming and a bit of a mishap that I find really funny. So the title is over here on VGC that says, I want to report a crime. BBC mocked for its wonky Nintendo setup. BBC Breakfast Studio team was responsible for retro games mishap, it's claimed. And yes, that's an NES cartridge plugged into an SNES. So the CEO of Yuki, where Yuki stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, or UK Interactive Entertainment, depending on how you wanted to interpret that, I guess they appeared on a British morning show to talk about the popularity of retro gaming in the UK, the rising popularity. And all of the attention was on that NES cart stuck into the SNES. So a spokesperson has since said, for transparency, the studio team set up the in-studio display independently and handled the placement of the consoles. Unfortunately, we couldn't adjust it whilst on air. If I was giving this interview, I would have a hard time giving the interview if I saw something like that. I'm surprised they didn't just try to do something about it or even notice it. Maybe they didn't even notice it. But anyways here, I'm thinking whoever set that up would probably have been trolling. I mean, let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. I'm having a really hard time keeping it together, taking a look at that. I think this may be very effective for raising attention and awareness about that segment. I would think this was done intentionally. Maybe it wasn't, but at the same time, I mean, if you're just sitting there looking at that, how could you not be distracted? And speaking about fun stuff, next up we're talking about TechDweeb. And if you're a fan of TechDweeb and a fan of retro games and ROM hacks, or a fan of either of those independently, you may be a fan of this here. There's a brand new ROM hack for Burger Time from TechDweeb called Burger Time Dweebluxe. And this one is up on his Patreon and it's 100% free. If you are curious about this one and wanted to learn more about it, again, like everything we talk about, links are in the description below at the bottom. And TechDweeb even has instructions on what to do. It does require a ROM of Burger Time Deluxe. And speaking about retro stuff and retro handhelds, next up we're talking about Anbernic. And Anbernic has just unveiled the RG477M in a brand new video on their channel. This video is just 21 seconds long. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of detail about this one yet in terms of price or specs or release date. But given that it's Anbernic, it's probably going to release relatively soon, and there's probably a bunch more on the way for different models. They say here the first high-performance flagship Android handheld with CNC technology. Taking a look at the comments, and the overall sentiment seems to be pretty positive. And the top comment here says, make every button quiet equals auto sold out. Let me know your thoughts about that one in the comments below. And speaking about quiet, next up we're talking about a game that I would say released fairly quietly, at least until now, because we're talking about it. And that is Dracula. It's up on itch.io at a name your own price, and you can even play it in your browser. Now, I don't know about you, but I find this very interesting. They say here, what is Dracula Hunter? I think I just called it Dracula previously. I meant to say Dracula Hunter. Anyways, Dracula Hunter was an arcade game released in 1979-80 by a Japanese firm. The company disappeared soon afterwards. And I guess there is an arcade board or two floating around out there, but it hasn't been dumped yet. And I guess the owners have not been willing to rip the ROMs and allow the board to be studied so it can be added to MAME. So this person here just decided to flat out recreate the game. So Dracula Hunter was written in Unity and it was created based solely on studying the available footage. Fascinating. Let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below and whether or not you plan on testing this one out. Next up is a follow-up to something we talked about on the weekend, and that was YouTuber FREAM in a very weird case. So to recap at a super high level, there was a trademark takedown of FREAM's channel, but FREAM owns the trademark. And I guess FREAM's lawyer filed the trademark on behalf of FREAM, not against FREAM. And anyways, YouTube just messed up and took FREAM's channel down. Anyways, it appears that FREAM has got their channel back. Things have been resolved. Kind of. The name is no longer available. So FREAM provided a screenshot here. Choose your unique handle by adding letters and numbers. You can change your handle back within 14 days. Handles can be changed twice every 14 days. And @FREAM is no longer available. They suggested FREAM E7E. To double check this one, I'm heading over to YouTube right now and taking a look at @FREAM, and it's not showing up. The page isn't available. Sorry about that. Try searching for something else. And if I try just using the CFREAM, it also doesn't work. So it looks like YouTube still has some work to do to get this sorted. And last up here, we're talking about Nintendo. Now, there's a rumor or 2 or 3 or 4 that there's going to be another Nintendo Direct in July. I wouldn't be surprised with the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza. But anyways here, this is really interesting. I guess Nate the Hate says some third-party developers are choosing not to announce their Switch 2 games yet. And that includes stuff like Capcom, Sega, Ubisoft, Namco, and many others. I'm wondering why they're not announcing these games. So part of me thinks that maybe these companies just aren't ready to announce things yet. Maybe development isn't in a state where they're comfortable showcasing gameplay. Maybe they don't have gameplay to showcase and trailers ready. And then the other part of me thinks that this is a complete nothing burger quote. I mean, you could say that Square Enix is developing a game and just not ready to announce it yet. You could say that basically for any game developer. I mean, I don't know here. Obviously, the Switch is going to get some third-party support, and obviously there's going to be some heavy hitters that end up releasing on the Switch. Well, I guess we're going to have to wait and see. Let me know your theories in the comments below. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Feel free to discuss anything we talked about in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate. Save your state.